I think it's just developed this just a little bit of a different and deeper trust with, okay, my body is growing this baby and I'm not really doing a whole lot like to make it happen. And so there's a lot of trust involved, and trusting that my body knows best with food has been one of those places.
Living a healthy, balanced life as a mom can sometimes feel impossible. With tiny mouths to feed, butts to wipe, and so many things vying for our attention, it can be easy to feel like we're in an on-again, off-again relationship with healthy living. But it doesn't have to feel this way. I believe every mom is a super mom, and you deserve to feel like one too, and you don't have to go on another diet to do it. Join me, Kristin Dovbniak, holistic nutritionist and certified intuitive eating counselor, for conversations on what it means to live a healthy, balanced life. I want to help you uncomplicate eating, improve your relationship with food, and live like the supermama I know you are. Hey friends, Kristin here. Welcome back to the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. I have an awesome guest on with me today that I'm so excited for you to hear from. Victoria Yates is a registered nurse and certified intuitive eating counselor based in Westchester, New York, who focuses on helping women make peace with their bodies and rediscover joy with eating. She struggled with anxiety around food for many years, but since she discovered intuitive eating, she's come to realize that healthy is so much more than eating perfectly. She helps the women she works with accept the truth that they can trust their bodies and that they themselves are the best expert on their bodies. And I'm going to add that she is also the co-host of the brand new Embracing Balance podcast with Catherine Herbison, who was also here on the podcast. So I'm so excited to have both of them here on the podcast talking about what it means to live a balanced life from both of their perspectives. Victoria and I got into a really great conversation about orthorexia, something that I haven't touched on the podcast here yet, and she gave a really good definition of what it means to take healthy living a little bit too far, about her struggle and how she moved away from her disordered eating and really found freedom with food. We talked a little bit about how her faith played a role in finding freedom with food and her body, and what it's like to eat intuitively while pregnant and what it means to eat intuitively while pregnant. She has a little baby boy coming fairly soon, and so it'll be really, really great for anyone who is listening who maybe is pregnant now or who plans on being pregnant in the future to get her advice, because she's got some really great insight on that. But even if you're not, tune into this episode because she's got some really, really great wisdom to share with us. So I'm so excited for you to dig in and hear this episode. So without further ado, here is my interview with Victoria. Welcome, Victoria.
Hey, Kristin, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being on the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. I am so excited to chat with you. We have some really great stuff to chat about.
Oh yeah, always a good day when you're recording a podcast.
I know, we were just talking about your brand new podcast that just released. It'll be probably a month old when this podcast airs, but I'm so excited for you having your own podcast. I'm so excited to listen in. So this is fun, having you on here and being able to share yours as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's been quite a journey. Both Catherine Herbison and she's my co-host, and I are so excited to just be kind of getting into this world of podcasting, and just what a great avenue to just share life. I feel like, I don't know about you, but for a while, even before starting a podcast, I was really into listening to podcasts. Actually, it's where I first learned about intuitive eating and started to do some of the work that we'll talk about here on this episode, just about healing my relationship with food and my body, and podcasts are where it started.
I think it is such a great way to connect with followers, to connect with listeners, because like hearing from someone's voice, I think is just so much more personal, and you can really hear like the passion behind what they have to share rather than like a blog post, which I still love. I will always be a writer at heart. But it is such a really cool avenue. And so I started following you probably, I don't know, maybe a year ago, over on Instagram, and you have such a beautiful Instagram account. Your feed is just gorgeous, and beyond it just being gorgeous, the information you share is just, it's so beautiful. I love your approach to food and intuitive eating and living well, but in a really, really balanced way. So I'm so excited to have you kind of share more about your story with us. So I would love if you would just start by just sharing your story. So sharing the story of your relationship with food and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, so I would say, I've always, for as long as I can remember, I really have always had a passion for this whole conversation on caring for my body, caring for our bodies. From a young age, I was really interested in just the gaining knowledge about nutrition and how food works in our bodies, just the human body in general. I'm actually a nurse too, so just having that background, that's kind of what prompted me into becoming a nurse. And then what shifted my vision and practice into um, working with women one-on-one in health coaching and intuitive eating counseling. So yeah, it really just started from a young age. But I will say something very innocent as just wanting to care for my body and wanting to have this knowledge kind of turned into something not so healthy. And it turned into more of an obsession and a way to try to control my body and just control my life even. So I would say around the time of late middle school, early high school, and then into college, I really struggled with um, kind of like anorexia slash orthorexia, which um, orthorexia, if you're not familiar with that, it's really just this obsession with healthy eating, and anxiety with eating anything unhealthy. And I believe there is some overlap with anorexia. And it sometimes is hard to fully separate both. I think for me, um, when I first when I first was dealing with some of these, and people started to recognize, my family started to recognize that what used to be just a pretty naive, desire to want to eat healthy turned into something more controlling that took more hold of my life than is really good. My mom came to me and she was like, hey, I think that this term orthorexia has maybe you have some more of those tendencies, because I really, at the time, I didn't really, I think partly I was in denial that I had any issue with food. And then partly I was, I was really struggling because I was like, I eat food, but it was just more of this mindset, where I was really had a lot of anxiety with anything that was quote unquote unhealthy. And so my diet became very restrictive. And so I felt like I resonated more with this term orthorexia. And I think that was healing in itself, in and of itself, just to be able to recognize like this is a problem. That's where I first, I think, realized that the way that I was approaching food and approaching health in general and approaching caring for my body was not a healthy approach. Um, but I don't know. I'm kind of going on a tangent, but what I'm trying to get at is some people say that um, anorexia and orthorexia kind of sometimes people label themselves as orthorexia when they really have anorexia. Um, but it's just a little bit more scary to say anorexia, and I can resonate with that. But when you look at kind of the definitions of the terms, there definitely is some overlap. So all that to say, I really at that point recognized that I had a problem, and I will say, that was a first step, but it definitely was not the end of the road for me, and it definitely took years and years and years after that to fully feel like I could embrace a healthy relationship with food and a healthy mindset around food. And I didn't quite know what that would look like. But that was kind of a turning point for me. Um, so from there, um, I really struggled with just letting go of the control. So I had recognized that I had an issue with food, but the problem and the really hard thing, with which anyone who has dealt with any kind of disordered eating with food probably can relate, that it's one thing to recognize that you want to change, but to actually make a change happen is really, really hard. And so through lots of meeting with therapists and kind of trying to get to the root of what was going on in my life, um, and meeting with dietitians and trying to reestablish, what is and isn't healthy, and how to actually live and eat in a way that was normal and not diety. That took quite a long time. But through all of that, I will say I learned so much about uh, about myself. I think anytime that we go through really tough times where we're really forced to do some of that internal work, we learn a lot and we grow a lot. And so that was what this period of my life was all about. Kind of side note, as I was working through a lot of these issues with my relationship with food, I came to realize that, as some people have maybe heard, a lot of times when you have issues with your relationship with food, um, it's often not about the food itself. So I came to realize that I had this just fear of letting go of control, and just this desire to have perfection in every area of my life. And food was one of those areas that I really clung to. And during that time too, that I was really struggling with this disordered eating. My mom was going through some really difficult health issues, and so there was a lot of uncertainty during that time. And so looking back, and like I said, as I was working through a lot of these underlying things that were driving my disordered eating, I recognized that with the uncertainty that was going on with my mom's health, I was turning to food to be the security that I thought I needed during that time. And so I looked to this control of food to feel like I had some kind of control over my situation. And so all that to say, there's oftentimes this underlying thing that we have to work through internally that has nothing to do with food. For me, it was recognizing that, I don't have a whole lot of control over my life. Like, I can control some things, but some things I can't. And just being okay with that was a huge stepping stone towards making peace with food, letting go of control, making peace with my body, and being open to this idea of eating intuitively. I didn't know it was called intuitive eating at the time, but I started to little by little kind of do that work. And so then, fast forward a couple years, I graduated from nursing school, started my first job, was working nights, and I feel like during that time I still, like, I had made a lot of progress, but I still had some little things to work through. But I felt like because I was starting my first job, um, working nights, I was exhausted all the time. Anyone who works nights can probably resonate with that. And really just had to let go of a lot of the things, a lot of the control that I had had and the strict schedule that I had had previously. So I really was forced to kind of shift the way that I was eating with being on a totally different schedule. I had to shift the way that I was exercising because I really didn't have the energy to do the type of exercise that I had previously been doing. And so that was, again, another little piece to the puzzle of my recovery. And then about a year later, I got married. And then my husband and I moved up to New York. My husband started dental school up here in New York. And that began just a whole nother chapter of my life. And so I was without a job for a couple of months as I was waiting on my nursing license to transfer, and I was searching for a job, in that waiting period. And that was also another little puzzle piece to kind of fit into this recovery story where really I had a lot of time on my hand. And so I did a lot of internal work at that point. And there was also a lot of change going on in my life at that point, too. So um, there were definitely some times where I felt myself sinking back into this place of disordered eating because anytime we go through different changes in our life, it can make us more susceptible to kind of sinking back into bad habits and bad mindsets. And so, thankfully, that was also around the time that like I said earlier, first heard about intuitive eating on a podcast and really just was like, I felt like the light bulbs just clicked in my head. I was like, this is how I'm supposed to eat. Like, this is how I was made to eat. And it just made so much sense to me. And so it really was kind of a quick, like, I recognized that and then just dived deep into learning everything that I could about intuitive eating and learning how to actually practice it in my own life. And I recognized, I'm not the only one who has a story that's similar to this story of this unhealthy relationship with food. It's a story that a lot of women have in our day to day, and they differed. People have different stories, of course, but there's a lot of people that are really struggling and need this type of freedom. So I looked into how to be an intuitive eating counselor because I heard that was a thing too, and really just got right into it and I feel like I really was able to find a place to help women in this way, in a way that I was really made to help women in. And I really feel like I always like to say, our stories, no matter the ups and the downs and the craziness and the hard times, the times that we are laying in our bathtub crying and the times that we're, loving life, they all have a reason. And I feel like, I really was, all of my story kind of led up to this place where now I can use that history, that knowledge, that experience to help other people really overcome the anxiety that our society puts us on us around food and the story that it tells us that we have to have this certain view of our bodies that is not a pleasant one. So yeah, that's kind of the long version of my story, but yeah, that is how I kind of came through going from an unhealthy relationship with food to now helping women who have gone down a similar path.
Oh, I love that you dug in so deep and shared so many different facets of your story. I love that you call them puzzle pieces too, because I think, it's true in my story, and I think it's true in a lot of women's stories that it's not a linear process to,
Mm, yeah.
sometimes it can be like a downward spiral. And I want to chat a little bit, I want to dig a little bit deeper into kind of the concept of orthorexia, but it can feel sort of like a downward spiral to kind of, losing touch with our bodies and maybe falling into this obsession. But coming out is, I think a lot of women, especially, when I'm talking with women about healing their relationship with food, they think that it's like, something's just going to click and then all of a sudden it's going to be straight up. But it is, it's finding these pieces and putting the puzzle back together and really finding your balance. That's why I call it your beautiful balance, because it's different for everyone.
Yeah.
Just like we all have our own
Yeah.
definition of what beautiful is, we are all beautiful in our own ways. Our journeys have different pieces, and it comes together in this really beautiful story. And I think that the world needs more women like you who are willing to share all of those pieces of their story, because I
Mhm.
am 100% with you that our stories are given to us for a reason, to be used for good. And maybe not all of the parts of our story, but I love that you took these different pieces of struggling with food and building up this positive relationship with food, and now you're sharing it with other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
So I want to dig a little bit deeper into this concept of orthorexia, and you described it so beautifully. I think that you gave it a really good kind of description. The idea that it's the difference between, say, like an anorexia and an orthorexia, and we're not saying this from a clinical perspective, but just from
Right.
kind of layman's terms, like what is the difference between anorexia and orthorexia? A lot of it is really the mindset behind it. It's that taking this concept, right, of this like I'm just being healthy and then taking it to the extreme. And like you said, I think
Mm.
there's a lot of overlap with different, with different eating disorders, whatever, that person's story is. But I think that I something that I think the listener could really benefit from is maybe a little bit more about how would somebody know if they are taking healthy living too far, because we know that living a healthy life is important, and living a healthy life, when I say that, is different for everyone, right? There is no one definition of healthy. But how would someone know if maybe they're on this journey to wanting to improve their health, or their fitness, or whatever it is for them? How do they know if they're taking it too far? Was there any point, I know you talked about your mom and her maybe mentioning it to you, but were there any moments in your own life? Is there anything that you could share with the listener about, how would somebody know if they're going from healthy to unhealthy?
Yeah. So it's interesting because I never would have placed myself in the category as of a dieter. I never would have called myself a dieter, but orthorexia is kind of creating so many rules about how you should or shouldn't be eating that it ends up being kind of this diet that you place on yourself. Um, and so really what it boils down to understanding and maybe recognizing that that maybe there's something not at peace with the way that you're viewing food would be it's taking up a lot of mental space in your thoughts throughout the day. So it's taking up this space where you're constantly thinking about food. You're constantly thinking about, is healthy food going to be available? And if it's not, or if it's in question that it would be available, something that you feel like is a safe food, then either there's a lot of anxiety around it, or it prohibits you from actually enjoying a normal life. So it keeps you from maybe going out and hanging out with friends, or it keeps you from uh, you know, doing something with people. It prevents you from enjoying the social aspects of life. So that's a big red flag if there is a lot of your mental space is preoccupied with the thought about, is this, are my safe foods going to be available? And going to extreme accounts to eat in this safe kind of way. And that can even mean spending a lot of time trying to make food, prepare food to be at this standard that you have to where it takes up and you can't really do a whole lot of other things. So those are some big red flags with maybe there's something going on with your relationship with food. And like I said, I don't know about you, Chris, but I talk a lot about like diet culture and dieting and how that lifestyle is not sustainable. And people know that, but even to say that, or orthorexia, having these food rules, having this black and white thinking that certain foods are good and other foods are bad, and I'm a good person for eating a certain way and a bad person for eating another way, and not allowing yourself to have that freedom to find some gray space in between that allows you to live a normal life that involves the things like I mentioned, like social outings and enjoying time with family with a clear mind that's not preoccupied by this fear and anxiety with food. Those are some things to say, even though it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm doing a Whole30 diet or I'm, following the Atkins diet or South Beach or paleo or whatnot. It's still a diet in and of itself. It's just your own diet that you're creating with these rules. So that's essentially what orthorexia is, and some big red flags with maybe recognizing that this is not how I really want to live. I don't want to live with this preoccupation with food all the time and this anxiety that goes into eating with every meal.
I think it takes so much of the joy out of eating, and eating can be such a joyous experience. And I mean, not every meal is going to be joyous. I mean, there are days like today where I just ran home from dropping my kiddo off at daycare, grabbed something that was in the fridge. It was leftovers from the other night, heated it up. It was delicious. I ate it probably a little bit too fast. It was not the most mindful experience, but it was delicious and it felt good in my body. And that was that. And then I moved on. I don't know if I would call that a joyous experience. It doesn't need to be every single meal, but overall, like, we should be enjoying our food. And when that is, that's not a thing anymore, when we're not enjoying our food and we're kind of obsessing over it and wanting to be healthy, but doing it in this way that is just to the extreme, like you were describing, I think that, like you were saying, it can become a problem, and it's so sad to see. I know, just looking back at my experience, and I started from this place of kind of this like low level orthorexia where I just wanted to be healthy. I was a high schooler and I was learning about nutrition and I wanted to be healthy, and it very rapidly turned into an anorexia. But then later on in my journey, I did get to the point where I was just trying to be healthy, and it got to the point where I'm like, well, I can't go to that restaurant because nothing is like organic. I went through a phase where everything needed to be, and organic foods are great. We eat a lot of organic foods now. I think that, avoiding pesticides is probably great overall, but we don't obsess over it anymore. It's just a choice that we make for our family, and we respect if other people don't agree with that, and that's okay. But it's not something that prevents me from going out and living my life. And so I'm so glad that you touched on that, because I think that it's, like you were saying, even though it's not this like specific diet culture where you're on the Atkins diet, it is so normalized now in our culture to have this low level obsession over food, and this idea that like if you're not like crazy about your food intake, if you're not like eating quote unquote perfectly or doing quote unquote good. I hear that from so many people I'm around where I'm like, oh, I'm just being bad today. And I'm like, no, 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 you're not bad because you chose the food that's satisfying to you. But it is
Yeah.
so normalized that we think that we have to either obsess over our food, whether you're on a diet or not, or just, eat whatever's in sight. So I'm really glad that you made that kind of distinction, that it can turn into something that's a real legitimate problem that can affect our lives.
Yeah, and like even with your example from today of, yeah, sure, there might not have been a whole lot of joy with eating, with just grabbing something real quick and like getting ready. There are, I think it's recognizing times too that there's going to be times that you can't put a whole lot of thought and energy and effort into making food. Sometimes there is that time, and that's really beautiful and really fun for a lot of people, myself included. But there's sometimes that, you know, it's to say that your life does not revolve around what you're eating. And so even if there are days that you have to be super practical and just grab something and eat it real quick because you have other things that you're doing and other things that you're other things that you're pouring into with your life, that, those are important, and food helps you to do all the things that you do. It helps you to have energy. But it's not the main part of your life. It's not the main thought throughout your day. So yeah.
Totally, 100%. So I'm wondering then, were there specific things in your journey that really helped you move away from this like obsessive healthiness, right? Like really, really wanting to be healthy to the point of extreme, to the point of taking over your life, to this point of food freedom? I know that, eventually you started learning about intuitive eating and getting into that, but were there specific things that really helped you along your journey?
Yeah, I would say a big thing was finally realizing that I was putting a lot of energy and time into the way that I was eating and into this unhealthy relationship with food. And I recognized that time was because because it was taking up so much of my time in my life. I wasn't able to fully enjoy some of the other things in my life. So I started to just be kind of like a fly on the wall without people noticing that I was watching them. But I was really watching a lot of the people in my life and just noticing how free they seemed with food. And just noticing that, they were eating with more of this carefree kind of vibe, and it wasn't negatively affecting them. Actually, they seemed a whole lot happier and full of joy, than I was. And so really just starting to learn from watching people. And so that's why I always like to say, who you fill your life with, either with social media and the people you're following on social media, or the people who are in your practical life, like day to day, you're running into, those people really matter. And so if you recognize that you're at that place where you maybe spend a little bit too much time and energy and mental space thinking about food, and you're recognizing that it's negatively affecting your health, whether it's your physical health or your mental health or some other area of your health, really just it's important to kind of cleanse yourself of anyone who is not being a positive influence, and really trying to fill your life with people who you can see in the same way that I did see living out this life of freedom, with food to some extent or another. People who are not body shaming all the time, and they're able to kind of eat fun foods. Like I think about when I was in college and I was living with my junior and senior year. I lived in a house just off campus, and it was six of us, six girls in this house. So that was a lot of fun.
That's a lot of girls in one house.
It was a lot of girls. It was a lot of girls. And we all just became such good friends. And I feel like that could go like one way with girls or another way, but
Totally.
but we actually really had such a great time and got close. We were like a family. We'd do dinners together, and I felt like I really learned a lot just from being around a lot of these girls who were not obsessing over food like I was. Like they would make popcorn on an evening just to watch a movie, and that was like something that I wouldn't let myself do because it was, I don't know, I had all these rules around when I should eat and what I should eat and all those things. So just to see that they were enjoying that, and I was like actually getting a little jealous. I was like, oh, I really want to enjoy that too, and I'm going to see what happens. And I started to realize that branching out and getting a little bit out of my comfort zone and testing the waters of this whole freedom eating kind of thing, and getting rid of these food rules, I started to experience that, you know what, it's not as hard as I thought it would be, and actually it's really enjoyable, and it feels good. It feels good not only for my body, but for my mind, and just to start to experience that, what it meant to break a couple of these rules, be a little bit of a diet culture rebel um, with the rules that I had in my life previously. So, yeah, that was a big turning point, I feel like. I think also my now husband, played a big role in me really experiencing food freedom and getting to where I am today, because he has a very good relationship with food. And he really just helped me to be okay with going and getting seconds. And if I was still hungry, or even if I wasn't super hungry, but it was good food and I just wanted to, he'd be like, you know what, go for it. And so like just wanting to enjoy food with him was also a big part of me fully recovering, because I was like, you know what, this whole relationship with food that I had, I know that it would negatively affect my relationship with my husband, and I didn't want that. And so that was another big motivator for me to make some changes.
It's so powerful to have those people in your life who are normal eaters, and to be able to see that and realize that, oh my gosh, there are people in this world who live healthy, fulfilled lives, and they don't obsess over food. And so I love that. My husband had a big part in my journey to food freedom as well, because he is just a very normal eater, and food, other than the fact that he has a food sensitivity that affects him a little bit, it's not a big deal for him. He likes what he likes, and he eats what he eats, and he eats when he's hungry, and he stops when he's full, and sometimes he eats extra. And it's so beautiful to see. And so I love hearing that from you too. And I really love something that you said before about kind of cleansing yourself of any of that, that negativity, and surrounding yourself with positivity. And the first thing that I thought of was like, a negativity cleanse is like the only kind of cleanse you want to go on.
Yeah. Oh,
But
it's so true. Yeah.
really, it just like moving away from those things that really affects you in a negative way, and moving towards positivity, moving towards those people who are going to be that example of normal eating, whether, we have the benefit of having somebody living in our home with us that's going to help us with that, or just surrounding yourself with positivity on social media, which is, oh my gosh, so huge, because it is a task to get rid of all of the negativity, or as much of the negativity as you can on social media, and really surround yourself with a positive. But I think that's so powerful, especially because it is so prevalent in our lives right now. Like, Facebook, Instagram, whatever social media avenues you're on, that, the body shaming and diet culture or obsessive wellness is everywhere. And so especially in our real life, surrounding ourselves with that positivity is so important. So I love that you shared that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's something else that you've shared a little bit about on social media, that your faith had a lot to do with your path towards food freedom too. So I'm wondering, how did having a strong faith play a role in your journey towards this place of freedom with food?
Yeah. So for me, yes, my faith is a huge part of my life now, and it was a huge part of my life then. And that's a little bit where that whole, I know that with every story, every hardship, that God has a purpose for it. So that's a little where that came up earlier here in this conversation, that I feel like my story, even though it was really tough at certain parts and really hard, that it had a purpose in the end, that I didn't really know at that time. But yeah, so I feel like I said before, a lot of the times when we have some type of issue in our lives, and specifically here with me, it was with my relationship with food. It kind of boiled down to a sin issue for me. Um, and so I feel like recognizing that not, um, I was not trusting God to be my provider, and I wasn't trusting Him to, that I didn't have to control what I was eating to be healthy, that He wanted me to live a healthy, strong life. I think I had a lot of doubts of His goodness in those times, and I didn't really recognize it at the time. But um, through recognizing that, you know, there was a lot that He was exposing in me when I was going through this period of my life, and still things that I deal with today, but just in different avenues like perfection and control. Yeah, I think it was just to have a spiritual background and to know in my heart that, even though I am a failure in this certain area, I'm not a failure because I have this relationship with God who loves me, even though I've messed up. And, I love what Paul says in the Bible about our weaknesses being our strength when we are living with God. And I really feel like that was the case, that I had to recognize that I am weak. I really, I'm not a strong person when I am trying to do things on my own. And so giving up that mindset and really surrendering, was just this totally different level of healing that went on with me, and really just grew me spiritually too. And yeah, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for everything that has gone on in my life and how I've been able to grow in my faith and help encourage others, because yeah, our faith does play a huge role in our relationship with food and our bodies, because we know that our bodies were fearfully and wonderfully made, and we know that God made food, and He made it for us to help keep us healthy, but He had a whole such a bigger picture, has such a bigger picture for how we live our lives than through this control of how we're eating.
Yes, totally. And the reason I want to dig in a little bit more, to this idea of allowing your faith and your spiritual journey to be part of your journey towards food freedom. And when I say I just mean whatever the listener is listening, is because I
Yeah.
think that especially, even in some of the Christian circles I've been a part of, it almost feels like our relationship with food is so separate from our relationship
Mm.
with God, but it's not. It's about our
Yeah.
relationship with ourselves and our, our bodies that, like you said, were created fearfully and wonderfully made by God. And so it has 100% to do with our journey towards food freedom, if that is our story spiritually. And for those of
Mm,
us who it is, it can play such a strong role in our journey. And I love that you mentioned, Paul talking about our weakness being our strength. And something that someone said to me was, when we are weak, we allow him to be, we have to allow him to be strong, and that that God can take on, anything. He can take on our journey to food freedom, but a lot of it is surrendering and trusting. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate
oh
you
yeah.
sharing that as part of your journey, because I think it is so big. And whatever someone's spiritual
Hmm.
background is, it is a part of it. It's a huge part of our
Yeah.
journey, and it's all related, right? These different
Mm,
facets of, like you were saying, these the puzzle pieces of your journey, and then the puzzle pieces of putting things back together and healing, from a spiritual
mhm.
place, from a social place, from a social media place. And I think a lot of what this comes down to is that it is so not about the food. Like you were saying in the beginning, a lot of
Mhm.
it's about our mindset towards living a healthy life, and what that really, really, truly means. And, something that I think really, really resonated with me is that you have a hashtag on Instagram that says hashtag redefining what healthy looks like. And
Yeah.
I think, as a nurse and a bar instructor, which I love, I was just telling my husband this morning that I need to get back into our local bar class. You're a little far for me to take your bar class, but we do have a
I
local
know.
bar studio.
Wish you were closer. I wish you were
Oh,
closer.
I'd love to take your class. It's so fun. But I'm wondering, what does this mean to you now? So this idea of, okay, so you went from this space of this, orthorexia, anorexia, this idea of wanting to be healthy and live a healthy life, and having this passion for health as a nurse and as somebody who wants to live a full life and serve God to the fullest and serve her family and be a good wife and all of these things. But not doing it or not approaching it from this place of obsession. So, what does redefining what healthy looks like mean to you?
Such a good question. Yeah, for me, I feel like it's healthy looks so different if you look online and Google, what does it look like? Or how do you live a healthy life? You're gonna end up with all of these different rules. Or if you listen to the news, you're gonna hear these um, differing and controversial different um, things saying one thing's good one day and one thing's healthy one day and one thing's not healthy the next day. And so it's going to be really confusing. But when we truly listen to ourselves, and we have a basis of knowledge about how to care for our bodies with food and exercise and sleep and rest and all these other facets that are included in living a healthy life, um, that is really where we discover what healthy looks like. And that it's not going to look the same for everybody. It's going to look different for me than it looks like for you, Chris. And it's going to look different for the listeners. And so it's really just letting yourself be the the expert on your body and being able to tune into what your body's telling you, and really honoring what you hear with that, which is one thing to kind of understand or like tune into what's going on in your body, but another thing to actually act upon that. And yeah, it's for me, this whole idea of redefining what healthy looks like, it's really about finding that place, that gray space. I think the gray space kind of concept is so huge because it's so much easier to really think about things in black and white, just in just black and white, um, because it feels a little bit more safe. Gray space is so much more vague and open to um, you have to do some work to figure it out yourself. Um, but it really is where we kind of take in all of the different aspects of living a healthy life. So your mental space, your physical body, your spiritual self, your even your environment, taking all of those aspects together and letting that be what helps to redefine what health looks like for you, as opposed to a lot of times people just focus on the food or just focus on the food and the exercise. So it's really just having more of this holistic viewpoint and recognizing that there is room for that gray space when we are talking about living a healthy life.
I love that concept of that gray space because it is so often, we think that things have to be one way or another way, but there is no one way or another way when really tuning into to ourselves and relying on that. And I love that you've said a couple of times it's about us being the expert of our own bodies because it's true. So many of us don't have that trust in order to be the experts of our own bodies, but it's that process, right? And
Yeah, totally.
there was there's something else that you said that reminded me of something I wanted to chat with you about because I love your blog, by the way. I didn't mention that you have a blog and you have
Oh,
some really really fabulous blog posts, and there was one that you wrote a little while back. And it really, really resonated with me. And I think this relates so well to this idea of needing to find this gray space and allow yourself to become the expert of your own body, but that it can be uncomfortable to find that space because it is countercultural. We think that things need to be in black and white. It's either healthy or unhealthy, but there is a gray space where we do become the expert of our own bodies, but it requires this choice to become uncomfortable and to find this space. And so you wrote this post a little while back on this concept of choosing to be uncomfortable. And one of the things you said that really resonated with me was that growth is a choice. You can choose to grow in yourself as a person, or you can choose not to grow. No one is holding you back except yourself and possibly your fear of getting uncomfortable. So how can getting uncomfortable help us grow in our relationship with food, in our relationship with ourselves, in finding this gray space, or what I like to call this your beautiful balance?
yeah. So getting uncomfortable, it's kind of this inevitable place that we have to go in order to grow. Because when we are wanting to do something different, and I talked earlier about that difference between recognizing that you need to change and actually fulfilling that and actually acting on that's really hard. And so often people can just stay in this like, oh, I need to change, but I don't know how, or it's too difficult. I don't have time, or, we come up with these excuses. And I'm talking about myself too. That post was because I don't like to get uncomfortable.
I don't think
It's not
anyone
anything
does.
that any of us, yeah, none of us like to get uncomfortable. And so, really what that looks like though is, with it in relation to, in working on your relationship with food and honestly anything that you're wanting to work on in your life, it requires some next steps and it requires some steps out of your comfort zone. And it requires you to be bold and be brave and, do something that's challenging. And, you know, I always want to encourage people to do that thing that's uncomfortable because honestly, I've seen a lot of fruit from it in my own life and heard of other people, in the people that I've worked with too. That when you do that thing that's uncomfortable, it's oftentimes uncomfortable just for a period of time. And so I think recognizing that it is short-lived and we think it's going to be forever that we're going to be in this uncomfortable place, but it's short-lived, in the long run. And the result at the end is so rewarding. I think a recent example of me I think it was probably around when I wrote that post, actually. I was going through training to become a bar 3 instructor. And I was kind of like in between the training. And there was a time that I was like, you know what? This is too hard. This is too much work. I don't have enough time for this. And I was really stressed out. But in my heart, I knew that it was something that would challenge me in a way that I really wanted to be challenged. And I knew that it would put me in this position to be an influence to people in the way that I wanted to influence people in the way that they're moving their body and thinking about their body and connecting with their body. So I knew it was this good thing and I wanted it, but it was really challenging. And there was a time that I almost gave up. And then I recognized, you know what? This is one of those places that is uncomfortable, but I foresee that the result at the end is going to be so worth it. And so I think just recognizing, just like any time in our lives that we go through a difficult time, and you can think back into your past and think about a time that was difficult, and just recognizing that, you know, that time was short-lived, in short-lived, or maybe it was long-lived, but it ended at a certain point, and usually you grow from those periods of time. So yeah, that was a little example of one of my recent places where I really had to get uncomfortable, and I'm so grateful that I did, and just learned so much through that experience. And I think it also just involves being open to learning about yourself, and just learning from those hardships, having an open mind to always be in this place of learning, and yeah, just being almost like a student of yourself. So
Yeah, I love that. I love the concept of coming at our lives from a place of curiosity rather than fear. And so much of that is this choice to allow ourselves to become uncomfortable so we can learn about ourselves. And I think that's so huge. And yeah, we never regret when we learn about ourselves. I really don't. I really truly think that, you know, everything is a learning experience. And if we approach life as everything is a learning experience, I'm growing from everything, even if it feels like like I'm not, you know, everything's a learning experience. And the same is so true with our journey in intuitive eating and, you know, finding our version of healthy and redefining what healthy looks like for us is it's all a learning experience.
yes, it definitely is.
So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, because you are in a really special stage of life right now, and I do believe you're the first podcast guest you're the second podcast guest, but you're the first one talking about intuitive eating who has been on who is pregnant. So yeah. Congratulations, you're having a little boy, right?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes, we found out last weekend.
So exciting. You announced it on Instagram, so I figured it was okay to share it on the podcast.
Oh, yeah, of course. I'm very proud of my little boy already.
Oh, yeah, totally. And so I'm wondering, because for myself, you know, I have two very different pregnancy stories. And because I've had two little girls, and for one of them, I was in a space of more intuitive eating. A lot of my journey happened after I was pregnant, but the other one, I was certainly still in this place of, you know, orthorexia and obsessing over food, and that really affected my journey. So I'm wondering, for you, for somebody who has been on this journey with, you know, finding this place of food freedom and balance, how has pregnancy changed the way you view food and your body and health?
Yeah, I feel like honestly, it's taught me even more. We're never, ever done learning about our bodies because they're always changing, and my body is changing right now. So that's been really fun. But yeah, it's just, you know, at the beginning, when I first was pregnant in my first trimester, I was having the weirdest cravings in the world. I was craving bratwurst and sauerkraut. Very specific. And then,
are you German? Like, did you have any German heritage?
My family, my dad's side is Dutch, so I did do I did grow up sometimes like 4th of July, we'd do bratwurst but like I hadn't had them in forever.
That's
And then
so
all of a
funny.
sudden
I
here
love it.
comes, I'm craving bratwurst.
Pregnancy is
And
weird.
pickles and yeah, pregnancy is so weird. Um, and lots of fried food and lots of like carbs and meat. And I despised vegetables for the first chunk of my pregnancy. And it just honestly, it felt really weird because I was like, this is not me. Like, this is not how I typically eat, but I went with it. And partly because I felt like I would gag if I ate vegetables. So I just went with it and I was like, you know what? I got to nourish this baby some way. And going with these cravings is part of that. And so I really just let myself enjoy it. And yeah, but it was an interesting place to be because, like I said, I was like, I just didn't really feel like myself. Thankfully now I feel like I can eat a little bit more normally to how I previously ate. So I'm really enjoying that. But yeah, it is this amazing mindset shift because I think back to, many years ago when food was really just the mindset was more like how can I go about my day with eating as few calories as possible, and still make it through the day, as opposed to now, it's like, food is part of what is growing my baby, and it's important. And of course, eating quality is important, but I'm a firm believer in, just being really in tune with your hunger. And there is some increase in hunger that I've experienced. So just letting myself be free with that and trust my body. I think it's just developed this just a little bit of a different and deeper trust with, okay, my body is growing this baby and I'm not really doing a whole lot like to make it happen. And so there's a lot of trust involved, and trusting that my body knows best with food has been one of those places.
I think I've talked to so many women before who have been pregnant and sort of feel that same sentiment that like they're almost forced into trusting their body, which sounds terrible, but like
Ah,
because you have to, because your body is going to respond, and it responds so much more powerfully I think when you're pregnant than any other time. It's because you're like, if I eat a vegetable, I'm going to gag. And so right now, that's not going to work for my body. So I love that you shared that. And I think it can be, I mean, not everyone is going to be pregnant and it's not everyone's story, but it can be a really powerful time of learning to tune into your body and appreciate your body's inner wisdom and having to trust your body because it is going to respond.
yeah, and it unfortunately there just like in the rest of our culture, there's a lot of um, guilt that goes into like pregnancy and motherhood and just that whole space. And just um, I feel like there's a lot of, eat this, don't eat this, and stress about this, don't stress about this, but I think when I'm really trying to just keep all of my knowledge about intuitive eating and the way that I was living my life and previously and my relationship with food, and just apply it to this pregnancy. And of course, there's certain things that you are encouraged to not eat because they can be harmful to the baby. Um, but just this whole different mindset, um, but also being at a place where you're going to nourish your baby. You don't have to stress about it, about whether or not you're eating enough nutrition for your baby. Likelihood is you are, if you are tuning into your body, and listening. Like I said before, I had to do a lot of trusting in that first trimester, because even though the baby probably needed some vegetables, I was not able to provide that. So that is where a multivitamin comes into play. um, So grateful for.
It really is all about that balance, right? Where your body will find that space of regulating itself later on down the line. Your baby is going to get what your baby needs. Our bodies are so powerful. And I think that it is a lot about just trusting that, well, at least I'm taking my prenatal and, come the second trimester, maybe I'll feel like eating a few more vegetables and maybe not. Some women are nauseous their whole pregnancy and they don't eat a single green thing their entire pregnancy. But our bodies are so powerful. And like God designed them to be able to grow a baby even when we are malnourished. It takes from us more than it's not going to take from the baby. It'll give to the baby whatever we have. So I mean, we're not necessarily doing ourselves well by not eating. I'm not saying that there is like shoulds and shouldn'ts around eating other than, those foods that could be dangerous. But I mean, like, if we never eat a vegetable and, we're a little bit low, at least our babies will still be good. And we can trust that. And we can trust that our bodies are going to take care of our babies. And that we will, when we get back to a place where we're feeling a little bit better, we'll be able to, listen to our bodies in a different way, not better or worse, but everything's a season, right? And pregnancy is just a different season in life and just a different opportunity to be able to trust that our bodies know what to do. I think it's so cool.
Yeah, totally. It's been a very enjoyable experience.
It's so fun. And though, we're all done with our two sweet little girls, it's so fun to talk to women who are pregnant, who are going through this, and encourage them, both myself and hear their own journeys, because everyone's experience when they're pregnant, just like everyone's experience with intuitive eating and motherhood is so different, but it's so powerful. Like experiencing these changes in our body, and then you get a baby at the end, which is so fun. And then you have a whole new set of challenges that come along with that. But good ones.
There's gonna be lots of learning, and that new phase also.
Totally. So something I was thinking about as you were sharing about already being proud of this little boy that you have growing inside you. What do you wish for your little guy growing up, and what kind of wisdom do you want to pass on to him in terms of his body and growing up and eating intuitively?
Yeah, I really just hope to be an example of someone who is proud of my body, and doesn't talk badly about it. And so I hope to just create this environment for my child now and future children, because that's so important. I feel like even though my family never said anything negative about my body growing up, just the talk between them about their own bodies was pretty detrimental to my relationship with my body when I was younger. And so just knowing that the conversation that I have about my body is really important for my children to have a healthy relationship with their bodies. So I just hope, I guess the wisdom is that they will recognize that they are strong in their bodies and they can trust their bodies, and that they have a certain expertise that even I don't fully understand as their parent, because we're each individual beings. So just being able to let them have that, of course, being able to parent them and help teach them, but letting them recognize that they do have this certain wisdom even from a young age. So I truly believe that about children, that they can be experts of their own body, just like you and I can be. So yeah.
That's so beautiful. I love that, because they're just tiny humans and they have the same wisdom we do, and just fostering that is so important. So I know that was kind of a wild card. I just thought of that being something that I really wanted to ask you. I love that. So, with that, because I am a foodie at heart and I really truly want to share food in a way that is joyful, I have three final questions to ask you that are sort of rapid fire. You can take as long as you want, but they're a little
Okay.
bit quicker. So,
Okay.
the first question is, what is your favorite thing to cook?
Oh, goodness. Um, a lot of things. I would say I love, this is not something specific, but I just love trying out a fun new recipe. Just like finding something online. Lately, I am really loving Pinch of Yum and Cookie and Kate, both of their blogs. And so I would say just anything from there, just picking it if I haven't tried it before and just experimenting in the kitchen with something new. I love trying something new. I don't love repeating all the time when I'm cooking. I feel like that's good, but it's not super special. Something super special to cook is something I've never tried before that looks fun and yummy. So I can share what I'm going to be cooking this week that's new and fun and yummy, if that
Yeah,
helps you.
totally. Share what you're going to try
Um,
this week.
yeah, I'm gonna make this pumpkin because it's fall and getting in the season here. It's a pumpkin creamy pasta with some rosemary walnut crispies on top.
Oh my gosh, get out. I am not even kidding you. I am making that for dinner tonight. I was just
No,
going to
you're
say it's a
not.
pinch of yum recipe, right? Because
Yes, it
I
is.
have it like tagged on like bookmarked on my
Oh my
computer,
goodness.
and I'm not even kidding you. And I was on my way here. I was like, what did I have planned for dinner tonight? And I was like, oh yeah, because
Oh,
my 6-year-old and I were going through a bunch of these recipes that I had planned for blogs, and that is something I'm
oh
making that for
my
dinner
gosh.
tonight. I love that.
I think I'm making it tomorrow,
Oh
so
my
tell
gosh.
me
Well,
how
we're
it
going to
is.
have to, yeah, I will. We're going to have to compare notes.
Oh,
That
that's
is
so
awesome. Oh
funny.
my gosh. So anyone who's listening, check in with us and see if we liked this recipe, and you can go ahead and try it too. Yeah,
Oh
her
yeah.
recipes are really great. So I love
Yeah.
that. I love that you love to experiment, because that's something that I love to do too. And just with the busyness of our schedules, I don't get to do as much anymore, but it is so fun to experiment and try new things in the kitchen.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
totally.
my second question then is, what is your favorite thing to order or have someone else cook for you?
Um, so there is this awesome Indian takeout place down the street from us, and it is called, I forget what it's called. Anyway, it's really good. Something wrap and roll. Calcutta, that's what it is. Calcutta wrap and roll. And they have delicious chicken tikka masala and naan bread. And that's probably, it's just like so warm and good for like a cozy evening at home watching Netflix and just hanging out. And kind of sad because I think they're moving to North Carolina soon. So gonna have to try to get some more of that in my life here soon. But yeah, it's delicious.
I love Indian food, and we do not have a great Indian food restaurant close by. I live on an island, and there is a place about like 45 minutes away, but that's a little far to drive for like a weeknight cozy dinner. But I love Indian food,
Yeah.
so I love that. Well, hopefully you find
Mhm.
another place if your place moves away.
I hope so. I hope so.
So, my last question I have for you is that we talk a lot here about finding what I like to call your beautiful balance, which is really what we've talked about today. And it's going beyond obsessing over food and finding nourishment and pleasure in food and in life. So, what does your beautiful balance mean to you?
Yeah. So for me, it really means giving myself permission to when I wake up in the morning, if I have a set schedule for how I think my day is going to go. Uh, Sometimes, as people probably know, sometimes your day goes as planned, and that's great. But sometimes it doesn't, and you wake up and maybe don't feel 100% or don't feel like um, doing all the things that you had thought that you could do. And of course, there's some things on that like work that maybe you're required to do. But as best possible, I like to just give myself the option to listen to my body. And if that means, if I had something like an exercise routine or, going to an exercise class, if I had that planned, but wake up and feel a certain way and I recognize that it wouldn't feel good in my body, I give myself the permission to make some changes. So yeah, so for me that balance really means, even when it comes to food, if I have one idea of how I think my day is going to go, being open still to that changing and being open to some flexibility with my day.
I love that. Permission and flexibility. That is really beautiful. And I think really encouraging. That's a really great place to end for anyone who I am so like you, where I like to have a schedule and I like to have some sort of structure to my day, but it really is just about tuning into what we need in the day and in the moment. So I love that.
Yeah.
So to close out, can you just share where my listeners can find you? Share all about your new podcast, Embracing Balance, and all of the places.
Sure. Yeah. So my personal Instagram is at Yates_Victoria_. So I don't know if you're able to tag that or put the link underneath, but you guys can find me there. I love being connecting with people on Instagram and getting to know you all. I would love to connect with you. And then I also, as you mentioned, Chris, I have a blog and website that you can find more about. You can read more about intuitive eating and more about my approach, as well as learn about, if you're interested in doing work one-on-one, I have some info there also. And then also, yeah, as you mentioned, I have a podcast that me and my co-host, Catherine Herbison, just launched, and it's called the Embracing Balance Podcast. And it just launched today. So probably a month out when this goes live. But it's all about figuring out what this whole concept of balance is, and learning how to really just tune into your body to kind of figure that out for yourself, and live a life that is more filled with joy, and where you have a better understanding of your role as an expert of your own body. So those are a couple of places that you can find me. And thanks so much, Chris, for having me here. This has been such an honor.
Hey, Mama. Do the holidays bring up more anxiety than they do holly jolly? Do you feel a little more like the Grinch than Santa Claus when it comes to thinking about holiday parties and how you're going to survive all of them? And all the food? Or maybe you feel a lot more like Santa Claus and you're worried you're going to go for the cookies at every house again this year and end up on January 1st diving headfirst into a cookie cleanse. Back to the on-again, off-again cycle once more. Here's the deal. There are a lot of so-called experts out there who give you bad advice around controlling yourself around food around the holidays. But the truth is, the more we try to control, the more out of control we become. So how do you survive the holidays, feeling good, making choices that actually serve you, eating just enough cookies to feel good, and singing like Cindy Lou Who on Christmas morning? Join me on November 29th for a Healthy Balanced Holiday, a free webinar all about worrying less about food and enjoying the season more. Click the link in the show notes to join and have a hollier, jollier, less stressed, and less obsessed holiday. Thank you, friends, so much for listening to this episode of the Healthy Balanced Mama podcast. I truly hope it encouraged and inspired you today to live a healthier life without restriction. If you enjoyed this podcast, would you do me a huge favor and give it a star rating and review in iTunes? Every rating, review, and subscribe helps this podcast be seen and heard by more women who need to hear it. You can find me, Kristin, on Instagram and Facebook at Healthy Mama Chris, or on my website, healthymamachris.com. As a reminder, the information and opinions on this podcast are intended for information and inspiration only and are not a substitute for professional medical advice or treatment. Please consult with your healthcare practitioner before making any changes. See you in the next episode.